Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here. My name is Andy Richardson, Program Manager at the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and very pleased to welcome you here to the virtual launch of the Indicators for Democratic Parliaments. I'll start with a couple of housekeeping slides and announcements, and then we'll move swiftly into the main body of the program. So please allow me to share my screen here. Today's event is organized by the IPU in conjunction with a number of partner organizations. We thank them very much for their contribution, and including in particular Inter-Paris, which has supported this event. Thank you to them. There are two sessions. They are identical sessions, today, Wednesday, and tomorrow, Thursday, in the European morning time. The reason for doing two sessions is to allow participants in different time zones to take part, and we will also have different interpretation. For today, we have interpretation in English and in Spanish, and you can access that in the usual way by clicking on the interpretation globe button at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording today's event to make it available to a wider public afterwards. We ask that you rename yourself in the list of participants with your country followed by your name, or your institution followed by your name as appropriate, so that everyone can see who is here in the meeting today. And we would like this to be a participatory event. It's set up as a Zoom meeting, meaning that the floor can be given to all of the participants. The format is, we have 90 minutes for this event. We will start with a number of interventions from different speakers, and then an open discussion. So please, for the moment, feel free to post questions and comments in the Zoom chat, and later in the event to raise your Zoom hand. Because it is a meeting, it does mean that people have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please do keep yourselves on mute for the moment. Thank you so much. And because it is a participatory event, we will be polling you on one or two occasions. And so let's do a first one now. I'll ask my IPU colleague, Emily, to post a link in the chat. You'll see a link appear in the chat box to a Mentimeter question. It's a starter question, an icebreaker. Where are you joining us from today? So Emily, if you could post the link, then if everyone could take 2 seconds to write where they are in the world, and we'll see that appear on the screen. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop my screen share, and we'll hopefully see the results. People are coming in thick and fast. I see from Belgrade and from Paraguay and Mexico. You're most welcome. And from Brazil, it's excellent that we have participation from Europe, from Latin America, from Africa, from a stuffy office. Is that a place? I don't know. From Uganda and the Netherlands and so many other places. We have approximately 70 people on the call right now, and we thank you all very much for being here. So Emily, thank you if you could take that down. Now, having made a quick acquaintance with each other, let's move straight into today's program. The goal here is to present to you the Indicators, which is a brand new product. And so we'll begin with some opening remarks from the IPU Secretary General, Mr. Martin Chungong, followed by the President of the Association of Secretaries General, Mr. Najib Al-Khadi from Morocco. So without further ado, I hand the floor over to Martin Chungong, IPU Secretary General. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I have the pleasure today to launch the preliminary version of the indicators for democratic parliaments based on SDG targets 16.6 and 16.7. As the biggest and oldest organization of parliaments, the Inter-Parliamentary Union is committed to strengthening the role of parliaments across the world. Independent and effective legislative institutions are the backbone of strong democracies, particularly in times like this, when the world is facing many challenges. Parliaments are expected to constantly adapt, learn, change, and improve to address the people's needs and concerns. Parliaments have proven their resilience time and again, and will continue to do so. The indicators for democratic parliaments are intended to accompany these evolutions. By providing a framework for parliaments to assess their capacity and performance, the indicators act as a tool for learning and development that helps parliaments to draw conclusions that can guide their future development. This is a very ambitious project indeed. The indicators cover all dimensions of parliamentary activity and are intended to be reliable and universally relevant regardless of parliamentary context. The preliminary version of the indicators that we are launching today runs to 450 pages and comprises 25 indicators, 111 dimensions, and almost 500 assessment criteria. It is the product of a joint effort of the Parliamentary Community, initiated and led by the IPU in a close partnership with 8 partner organizations: the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, the European Commission, Inter-Parliamentary, the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, NDI, United Nations Development Programme, UN Women, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and the Directorio Legislativo. I take this opportunity to thank all the partners for their trust and enthusiasm for this initiative and for the significant contributions of time and resources in all stages of the indicators development. The IPU and partners also very much appreciate the contribution of parliaments. More than 20 parliaments conducted pilot exercises to review the indicators and provide feedback, which informed the current preliminary version. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes the importance of strong institutions, including strong parliaments. We believe that the indicators, among other purposes, will help parliaments to evaluate their progress against SDG 16, particularly Target 16.6, develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels, and 16.7, ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. These adjectives, which closely mirror the ones that IPU identified back in 2006 as key criteria for democratic parliaments, provide the structure to the preliminary version of the indicators. The indicators are primarily intended for parliaments, their members and staff, to assist them in assessing their strengths and weaknesses as a basis for improving their performance and for tracking progress. They are based on the principle of self-assessment, placing Parliament firmly in the central role in its own development. However, we expect the parliamentary indicators to be useful not only to parliaments but also to governments, parliamentary strengthening organizations, and other local or international organizations, donors, scholars, and civil society actors interested in strengthening democratic institutions. The indicators are a public good and are available to anyone who wishes to use them. The indicators are the result of long, detailed, and careful planning, analysis, and consideration of existing knowledge and parliamentary practices. Today, we have reached the point where the IPU and partner organizations have decided to make them publicly available in the form of a preliminary version. The intention is to let the indicators live in the real world for a period of time to allow their relevance and usability to be examined, tested, and confirmed by parliaments for whom they are created. Therefore, this launch event also represents the opening of a public consultation process. Throughout the remainder of 2022, we will be listening and learning how to improve this preliminary version. I invite parliaments, organizations that work with parliaments, and any other interested stakeholders to provide feedback on this preliminary version of the indicators. Our ambition is for the indicators to become a common tool within the parliamentary community that is used by parliaments and parliamentary strengthening organizations to strengthen the institution. I recognize that measurement and assessment of parliamentary capacity and practice takes time and effort and will inevitably generate differences of opinion. I am confident, however, that the indicators can be an important reference point, an accelerator of progress towards strong democratic parliaments that deliver on the expectations or aspirations of the people they represent. I invite you to discover the indicators, and I reiterate the IPU's support to parliaments as they seek to develop their institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Secretary General of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chongong. We'll now move to the President of the Association of Secretaries General of Parliament, Mr. Najib Al-Khadi. He is the Secretary General of the Chamber of Representatives of Morocco, and so he will speak in French. And so for anyone who would like to listen to the interpretation, please do select English or Spanish interpretation at the bottom of your screen. And I would like to thank very much our interpreters today for their generous willingness to interpret Mr. Al-Khadi. I also take the opportunity to thank both Mr. Al-Khadi personally and the ASGP for their support throughout the process of the development of these indicators. The ASGP is a strong and long-standing partner, even sister organization to the IPU, and we greatly value this cooperation. I pass the floor to Mr. Al-Khadi.
Mesdames et messieurs, je vous remercie pour votre invitation. N'ayant pas pu me rendre disponible aujourd'hui, je vous adresse cette brève intervention par vidéo. En préambule, je tiens à adresser mes félicitations à l'Union interparlementaire pour le travail ambitieux et très riche qui a déjà été réalisé à ce stade sur la mise en place de nouveaux indicateurs démocratiques pour les parlements. Ces travaux s'inscrivent dans la droite ligne du rapport Parlement et démocratie du XXIe siècle, publié par l'Union interparlementaire au début des années 2000. Il y avait eu un impact considérable auprès des parlements du monde entier. Ce guide démocratique a permis d'aider beaucoup de parlements à élaborer leur plan stratégique en vue d'améliorer la qualité du travail parlementaire. Je suis personnellement convaincu de la nécessité d'actualiser ce référentiel à travers un nouveau document dont l'importance sera capitale pour les secrétaires généraux, pour le personnel parlementaire et les parlements dans leur ensemble. L'Association des secrétaires généraux du Parlement, que j'ai l'honneur de présider, a été tenue régulièrement informée de l'avancée de ce projet qui me tient particulièrement à cœur. Je tiens d'ailleurs à remercier Mme Karen Jabre et M. Richardson d'être venus présenter l'avancement de ces travaux à plusieurs reprises aux secrétaires généraux de la FGE, notamment à Madrid en novembre 2021, à Nicaragua en mars 2022. Je peux vous assurer que l'Association des secrétaires généraux des parlements est particulièrement attachée à l'amélioration des pratiques pour que nos parlements soient plus efficaces, transparents, plus participatifs et plus représentatifs. Je suis également certain que tous les parlements ont une marge de progression aussi cruciaux que la transparence, la représentativité et la participation du public. Tous ces thèmes sont régulièrement abordés au sein des assemblées plénières. Pour nous, secrétaires généraux, ce référentiel sera un outil précieux pour permettre à nos administrations de conduire un travail d'auto-évaluation, d'identifier des axes d'amélioration pour renforcer nos parlements. Nous l'avons rappelé au cours de la dernière session, en tant que secrétaire général, nous avons un rôle central de conseiller, de pilote, et nous devons être une force de proposition auprès des présidents de nos. Je suis convaincu que les indicateurs démocratiques conçus par l'Union interparlementaire sont un outil précieux pour nous aider à remplir l'instruction du secrétaire général et plus particulièrement pour améliorer les pratiques démocratiques au sein de nos parlements respectifs. Mais cela ne peut se faire qu'à une condition. Chaque parlement est conscient de l'opportunité incroyable que mise à disposition par l'UE représente pour l'amélioration de ces pratiques. Comme Mme Jabre l'avait rappelé lors de notre session de Nicaragua, il est impératif que les parlements se saisissent eux-mêmes des outils proposés par l'Union interparlementaire sur la base du volontariat, car l'expérience montre que c'est la méthode la plus efficace pour obtenir des résultats concrets. C'est pourquoi je vous incite vivement, chers secrétaires généraux, à vous saisir personnellement de ce formidable travail réalisé par l'Union interparlementaire en mobilisant dès à présent vos équipes, par exemple, en désignant un ou plusieurs référents au sein de votre administration pour analyser vos pratiques en fonction de la grille de lecture élaborée par l'Union interparlementaire et formuler vos éventuelles observations à l'Union interparlementaire en attendant la publication des indicateurs définitifs en 2023. Pour conclure, je voulais vous informer que la prochaine session de l'AIGP à Kigali en octobre 2022 sera l'occasion d'approfondir le sujet avec les secrétaires généraux grâce à l'organisation d'une conférence conjointe avec l'Union interparlementaire sur ce thème. Je vous invite d'ailleurs dès à présent à faire connaître au secrétariat les éventuels thèmes ou questions que vous souhaitez aborder plus particulièrement au cours de cette conférence conjointe. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Khadi, and in particular we're looking forward so much to this opportunity at the next IPU Assembly in Rwanda in October for a joint session, a joint discussion with the Secretaries General of Parliament for their perspectives, their feedback on this preliminary version. So let's move into the heart of the subject now. I'd like to invite my IPU colleague, Ms. Irena Miyanovic, to introduce you to the indicators themselves, the form, the shape, and the content of the indicators. While Irena does that, we'll be posting a link in the chat to the indicators website. So please feel free to browse around, to take a look for yourselves. And I'd like to express my particular thanks to Irena, who has coordinated the work to develop this preliminary version of the indicators over the last 2 years. So Irena, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon to all, or good day, or good evening. I will now share my screen for the presentation. I hope that it will work well. So I hope you can see the presentation on your screen. I will focus in this presentation on the key features on the indicators for democratic parliaments. And this is the cover page of the publication and publication of preliminary version. And its publication and launching today. Its publication launching today and tomorrow make an important milestone towards the development and completion of the final version of indicators. The indicators have been developed through a close partnership, a joint initiative. It is 8 partner organizations together with IPU, who initiated the project. So what are indicators? They are a global holistic set of parliamentary indicators across all areas of parliamentary work. They are aimed at assessing both parliamentary capacity and performance, which means both formal powers and how those powers are used in the practice of the parliament. Indicators are a tool for learning and development through an evidence-based assessment, and we believe that evidence is an important component of indicators that can contribute to objective assessment and ensure meaningful, useful, and comparable results. Indicators are also intended to be reliable, comprehensive, and universally relevant, and applicable for every parliament, regardless of its context. The purpose of indicators. It is to assist parliaments in assessing their strengths and weaknesses, and to support parliaments to further learn and improve. Indicators are structured around SDG targets 16.6 and 16.7, adapted to the institution of Parliament. The indicators framework has 4 levels, target, that contain sub-targets, total in 7, and they are in line, they are set by the SDG targets as effective, accountable, and transparent parliaments, and responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative parliaments. Each sub-target have a number of indicators. We have in all 25 indicators, and it is the 3rd level of the framework. And each indicators has several dimensions, and we have 111 dimensions within the indicators. It is at the level of dimension that the assessment is made using assessment criteria. This is just a quick look at the entire picture or structure of indicators with all 25 indicators and how they are grouped within sub-targets. To show how one indicator or dimension look like, we would like to show the indicator in this case, example of indicators on parliamentary autonomy. I can go here directly to this indicator, which is posted on the Parliamentary Indicators website. So you see here indicator 1.1, parliamentary autonomy, and like all other indicators, it has a small short description with the list of dimensions that it comprises. We will go through now the first dimension here, institutional autonomy. First, we have here a short, let's say, ID of the dimension and where it belongs. And the first part, introductory part, is about the dimension. It explains what it is about and why does it matter, and ensures that there is a common understanding and clear understanding on what is the subject of dimension. We have here aspiring goal, the text box.
Excuse me 1 second, Irena, sorry to interrupt. On the screen that's being shared, we see only the slide. So for all of the participants, I would encourage you to open the parliamentaryindicators.org website. That is, the link has been posted in the chat, so that, and to find your way to the indicator on parliamentary autonomy, so that you can follow what Irena is describing. We were planning to show it on the screen, but that's not happening right now. So our apologies for that little hiccup.
No, I'm sorry that this is happening because I'm sharing my screen still.
Yeah, so we see the slides. Anyway, Irena, please go ahead.
Okay, so I hope that you can join me by looking at the Parliamentary Indicators website, but I will go ahead. So I have started to explain that there is a box with aspiring goal. It is a description of an aspiring goal that Parliament may seek to attain, and it is based on global comparative analysis of parliamentary practices and models. And the assessment is, of course, central part of each dimension, which contains several assessment criteria. You can see here how one assessment criterion looks like. It actually contains several statements relevant for a given segment of parliamentary work, and respondents can select one of the 6 descriptive grades that most accurately reflect the situation in their parliament. So they can just click to any of these grades. Each criterion has a space for entering the evidences for the assessment criterion, which can be anything from constitutional or legal framework to parliamentary records and other documents. So the respondents should document the evidence on which the assessment is based. And it can be, as I said, this could be different documents. We also provide at the beginning of the assessment some recommendations of which evidences can be gathered prior to the assessment exercise to support the assessment of criteria. And at the end, there is a space for recommendations for change. Recommendations for change should result from the assessment exercise and discussion within the group and among participants. And respondents are invited to note here their ideas on how to improve a given segment of parliamentary work. So sorry again that this didn't work. I need to back to my presentation. So here is the next slide. As you see, we are planning a long-term and then short-term goal for this year is testing preliminary indicators by a significant number of parliaments, or as many as possible. And views from other stakeholders are welcome too. Based on feedback received, we will review and refine the indicators and prepare the final version, which should be adopted and endorsed in spring next year. We hope that indicators will be widely recognized by parliaments and broader parliamentary community, and support by the IPU and partners would be available in full implementation process and in years to come, which would include gathering data on the impact of assessing indicators and its evaluation. The website parliamentaryindicators.org serves as the hosting site for indicators, where you can download publications, separate subtargets and indicators, and find all other information about the indicators. To enhance experience for users with this website, we have made a video tutorial, Parliamentary Indicators, Getting Started, which will be presented now. I would ask my colleague Emily to put it on. Thank you for your attention. indicators for democratic parliaments based on Sustainable Development Goals, Target 16.6 and 16.7. This tutorial is designed to assist parliaments, parliamentarians and staff, and other stakeholders in navigating through the website and to support the assessment and testing process. So let's start. At the homepage, you can find the most relevant information about indicators, about the project, its development, objectives and purposes, about involvement of parliaments through the pilot testing, and about events too. The indicators have been developed through a joint initiative of the IPU and 8 partner organizations, which are presented here. The other way to read this information and find more details is by selecting About the Indicators in the top navigation bar. The button Indicators leads to the central part of the website. All indicators contain a short description of the indicators framework. The indicator structure can be downloaded here. It is a list of all 25 indicators and 111 corresponding dimensions that contain almost 500 assessment criteria. If a parliament is thinking about assessing one or more indicators, we would recommend consulting the list as a first step to see what indicators and dimensions are there and how they are grouped. And here is the entire publication, which can be downloaded in both Word and PDF. This document contains all indicators with an assessment guidance. A few introductory pages can be helpful before the assessment itself, for understanding the purpose of indicators and their preliminary version, and also how to use them. Developing a global set of parliamentary indicators is a large-scale project, so the publication is large too, containing around 450 pages. We wanted to make it more user-friendly by grouping all indicators into 7 sub-targets, which are also available in both PDF and Word. These sub-targets are accessible here, but each of them can be accessed directly from the top navigation bar too. Let's see, for example, the sub-target 5 on inclusive parliament. We provide here a short information about sub-target selected, what it means and how many indicators it comprises. Then you can see all the indicators separately, 2 in this case, together with their corresponding dimensions. Each indicator can be downloaded in Word as a user-friendly format for assessment purposes. It allows simple selection of grade options and entering required data directly into the indicator file during the assessment. Now, how to use indicators. Before final adoption of this work, the IPU and partner organizations have decided to make indicators publicly available to see how they work in practice, through testing them in a real world. Therefore, we invite parliaments to use the preliminary version of indicators to assess their capacity and performance in areas of their specific interest and provide us with the feedback. Any comments, suggestions and other inputs from parliaments, as well as from other stakeholders, are welcome in order to improve the indicators. The assessment guidance aimed at supporting the process of assessment and testing can be downloaded here. The feedback and indicators feedback in the top menu leads to the online form for parliaments and other stakeholders to submit their feedback about the relevance and applicability of the indicators assessed, as well as on the assessment process. For any additional information and assistance, please click the Contact Us. We will be happy to provide assistance and support in the assessment and testing process. So I hope that this tutorial will be helpful for users. And we are now going to take a deep dive into indicators first with some of the members of, allow me to say, amazing project team. This project was initiated in the IPU Parliamentary Standards Unit, and we shall therefore start with the program manager of this unit, Andy Richardson. Andy, could you tell us more about the objectives of indicators and of their preliminary version?
Irena, thank you. I'm going to try to capture this in 3 points. What are the objectives? Why are we doing this? 1, strong democratic parliaments. I think that everybody on this call, no doubt, shares a common interest in strong democratic parliaments. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be strong and democratic for a parliament? The SDG targets provide a first level of an answer, and the SDGs are a universally agreed framework within that all countries around the world, all governments have signed up to. These targets 16.6, 16.7 are similar to the criteria for democratic parliaments that the IPU had already identified some 10 years ago. But how can a parliament know how it is doing, how effective, how accountable, how transparent the parliament is being? How can people outside parliament know and assess their parliament? And that's the first purpose of this indicator framework. It's a shared framework for what to assess and how to assess Parliament's capacity and performance. 1. Second objective is around learning and development. Now, we know, you know, that parliaments are always evolving, always changing. And through these indicators, through a process of self-assessment, we believe that parliaments can identify their strengths and weaknesses. By assessing their current performance, they can set priorities, plan strategically, allocate the resources, and track progress over time for the development of their institution. Indicators are fundamentally a tool to support Parliament's learning and development. And thirdly, parliamentary community. By the parliamentary community, I mean first and foremost the world's parliaments, and also the organizations that work with parliaments, the researchers, the civil society organizations. And collectively in this parliamentary community, there's an incredible expertise. This work on indicators acknowledges 2 decades of work that has taken place in parliaments and across different organizations on developing ways to measure and assess parts of parliamentary performance. And we've tried to bring it together into a holistic framework that can become a reference for the entire parliamentary community, which is owned by that community. And so I'd like to express my thanks to everyone, the parliaments and the organizations and the individuals who have been involved in this process so far. Thank you. Irena, over to you.
Thank you, Andy, for your thoughts. And yes, indicators are all about strong parliaments. Strong parliament is at the same time effective, accountable, transparent, and so on. Developing indicators was a long journey, started in 2019. It was sometimes challenging and demanding, but it was interesting all the time. And it certainly required well-organized and coordinated working process. I will now ask Friedarinos, Program Director from National Democratic Institute, to share some highlights about different stages of the working process. Frida, floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Irena, and thank you, Andy, and all of the partners on this call. I was absolutely honored to be able to serve as a member of the core drafting team and project team as part of the indicators process itself. This was one of my favorite projects that I worked on over the last couple of years, and I just really enjoyed the collaborative nature of the team, in addition to the global expertise that kind of came together to make our process so effective. I do have a slideshow that I can share. I don't know if it would be possible for the host to allow me to share my screen. Otherwise, I am happy to just share a couple of notes. Excellent. Thank you so much. Bear with me just one moment, please. Okay, fantastic. So just a little bit about the process. Andy covered a couple of these elements, as did Irena, but our drafting process really worked well because we had a collective agreement on the template that we were using and some of the resources that we reviewed in order to to complete the indicators themselves. As Andy mentioned, this was building off of a 20-year effort of collective expertise, data gathering, research, and other information sharing from parliaments across the world. And so it really worked that we had that collective compilation of something to build off of, right? Not working from scratch. And we also agreed that this was for parliaments, right? This wasn't for us as development practitioners as much as it was for parliaments to be able to look at their own structures and assess in line with global good practices. We had a lot of collaboration. We checked in frequently. We asked one another questions. We debated with one another based on practices that we knew in our own systems. And this really helped ensure the globally holistic nature of the project itself. From there, we did pilot tests, and this was a really important process for us in order to gather feedback from parliaments themselves, both staff in parliament and members across different parties. We also worked with our teams respectively to help facilitate those processes in countries themselves. Finally, our final review and launch, as you saw, the website was created in order to kind of create a user-friendly platform. This has been helpful for us, I think, in both reviewing the indicators in a kind of full scale format, right? Because when you work on it piecemeal, it's hard to envision it in a full product. And so this has been a really helpful tool. And I would just encourage folks who are looking through the website, if you have questions or recommendations, please let us know. And then just recommendations, I think, based on my experience working on this project, and for others who may be taking on projects of this sort, I really just recommend the following that you see here on the screen. A couple of things. Don't be afraid to debate and ask questions. When you are trying to develop a global product that encapsulates the vast nuance of parliaments across the world, you are going to have different experiences and different ways of going about techniques for legislative strengthening and development. And so it was really nice that we kind of were able to chat as a global project team in order to get to the results that we did. So that's all for me. I'll keep it short and sweet, and happy to share a copy of this presentation with you all and to answer your questions. Thank you so much again to the IPU for this project, for spearheading this project, and for inviting me to join you all today.
Thank you, Frida, for going briefly through the working process. It was short and sweet. And thank you also to you and to NDI for the global parliamentary indicators website. I need to say that NDI provided a lot of support and actually created the website with some support from our side. The primary purpose of the indicators is to support Parliament's ability to learn and improve. The ultimate objective is to strengthen parliaments and enhance democracy. Question for Anthony Smith, Chief Executive, Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Anthony, how do you see relevance and possible impact of indicators to democracy?
Thank you very much, Irena. And just like Frida, for me, it was a huge privilege to be part of the project team that colleagues at IPU convened. I really want to pay tribute to you, Irena, and to Andy for all of your both hard work, but also very expert facilitation of the process, and to the other members of the project team. And also to parliamentary colleagues around the world that have contributed to the process so far. So in answer to your question, Irena, I think I want to touch on the reason that this project is relevant. Andy's three objectives are absolutely right, but why do those matter? And to touch briefly on the type of impact that we hope it will have. So why is this project relevant to all of our work? Well, for those of us that care about the things that Parliament do, respect for the rule of law, accountability of those in power, personal freedom, the falling levels of trust in public institutions, including Parliament, it's more than just a public relations problem. If we aren't ensuring that democracy is working, then we're opening the door for anti-democrats to step in. And we've seen this happen time after time, and we have to do better. Parliaments are the face and the voice of the people. And if we're to reverse the fall in trust, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror, as well as doing the job of shining a light on the executive and holding it to account. As Andy said, we have to look at how parliaments can be effective. So for those of us working in or with parliaments, these indicators are a great starting point to address this problem for two reasons. First, because they're based on commitments that the whole world has made. We have all, through the different mechanisms that went into developing the Sustainable Development Goals, played a part in developing the commitments, and we're all in positions to have contributed to our own national governments making those commitments. The second reason is because the indicators are about things that really matter to people in all of our countries. Just look at that list. Greater accountability, inclusion, representation, responsiveness, effectiveness, participation, and transparency. These 7 issues are not chosen at random. They're well targeted, and they do really matter. In too many countries, those in power are not accountable. In too many countries, women are prevented from exercising their political leadership. And in too many countries, the way that parliaments take decisions is hidden from view. But even if it's obvious that those commitments matter, it's not obvious how a parliament acts to achieve them and does the best job that it can. And that's what the indicators are designed to help with. They matter. They are relevant to all of us in our daily lives, and they're relevant to all of us in working to secure democracy for future generations. So what impact do we hope the indicators will have? Well, I have to say that in the project team, our ambition is big, that by using the indicators, parliaments will rebuild trust in government and in democracy. Trust that we're working for citizens, not against them, and trust that parliaments and democracy are on their side. And that ambition is big because parliament's responsibilities are just as big. And we hope that our small contribution will, through your work, through the work of all of those parliaments who use the indicators, and all of those people who support parliaments around the world, we will together have a global impact. Thank you very much for the privilege of participating in this project team and in this launch event today. Thank you, Irena.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for bringing into the focus the most essential, the most important reasons actually for parliaments to undertaking assessment process and assess some indicators. Drafting, the project team has one member from the civil society, Maria Baron, Global Executive Director of Direttorio Legislativo, who has brought to the project a valuable perspective of a civil society and also from parliaments in Latin America. Maria, what can you say? What is the importance of indicators from a society perspective?
Thank you, Irena, and thank you, Andy, for this great presentation. I'm very, very happy to be here to finally witness the result of the work of us 9 partner organizations for more than 2 years. I remember that event in Geneva in September, October of 2019, where we started debating about the 7th or 8th round of the indicators for democratic parliaments based on SDG targets 16.6 and 16.7. That in a way would allow parliaments to, and it's what they are today, would allow parliaments to assess and diagnose or analyze the gaps and the weaknesses in any part of or any segment of parliamentary work through this evidence-based tool, which I think is an addition to the public debate about parliaments today. What I think is most relevant is that it allows for ways in which we can implement changes and be able to allow for these institutions to transform themselves. And as you know, from my perspective of civil society organization, this is a moment in time when there is a decreasing trust in political institutions, including parliaments. And these are, and there is a growing perception that the political leaderships of, or the political world in each of the different countries of the world are losing touch with the people, with the citizens, with the communities, and that they pretend or they say that they represent. So I think one objective of these indicators, and I think it will be really well addressed, is how to engage the public, which that's an addition to the other rounds that we have worked at. And it's another one, how to better communicate with parliamentarians and the representatives, and how in a way can civil society collaborate in the different areas of the parliamentary work and proceedings. And this is particularly important to take the public's expectations of stronger action, especially in the context of the 2030 agenda. So as the Secretary General said earlier, it's a very ambitious initiative, but an initiative that we have worked a lot. And that's why I think we are starting today a period to sort of co-create this document and receive comments and consultations from the public to make it more acute to what the public is needing. So I have great expectations with this tool, and I hope that a lot of parliaments join this initiative in the different parts of the world so that we can adjust and work on the transformation of these institutions. Thank you very much, Irena and Andy. It's a great work that you have spearheaded.
Thank you, and we do hope that civil society will have a way to use the indicators alone, or maybe even better in cooperation with parliaments.
I'm sure
today with us is also Jonathan Murphy, head of the program Inter-Parliamentary, which provides support to many parliaments. Jonathan, could you explain how the assessment of indicators in parliaments really work?
Thanks very much, Irena, and thank you, everybody. Thank you to the IPU for your leadership. And as everybody else has said, it has been a real pleasure to work on this project with the different partners who have spoken and who aren't here today. And particularly, I would like to thank the parliaments that have worked with us, and very pleased that that the Hellenic Parliament of Greece and the Bundestag, the German Parliament, are here and are going to be speaking with you about their role, because as Frida and others have said, this is a project for parliaments and with parliaments. So yeah, I'm the head of Inter-Parliamentary, which is Parliaments in Partnership, the European Union's global program in support of parliamentary strengthening. As Irena has said, this project is one that is based on indicators for democratic parliaments, building from the Sustainable Development Goal targets 16.6 and 16.7. And what those SDG targets are about really is effective, responsive, democratic governance. And every parliament within this SDG target has the mandate and the desire to enhance its effectiveness in carrying out its democratic mandates, in carrying out legislation, executive oversight, citizen representation, and voting and oversight of the national budget. And these indicators allow parliaments themselves to assess their strengths and weaknesses, the things that they are doing well and the things that they could do more effectively, taking into account established good practices that are described in the indicators. The assessment process provides a solid foundation for identifying changes and improvements in parliamentary functioning to better serve citizens and to contribute to a country's sustainable development. The parliamentary self-assessment process involves 3 stages of preparation, the assessment exercise itself, and follow-up. During the preparation phase, the Parliament establishes the objectives and the outcomes of the exercise, selects the indicators to be used, and organizes the process. In other words, who is going to do what within the Parliament. During the assessment phase, the assessment session or sessions are organized. The performance of the Parliament on the different indicators is discussed, involving as broad a range of people within Parliament and, if possible, outside Parliament, interlocutors with Parliament, agreeing on a grade and recommending changes, identifying changes that are recommended by the team within the Parliament working on the assessment. In the follow-up stage, the Parliament will agree on its priorities for change, develop and approve an action plan, and establish a process to monitor and evaluate the agreed changes. There's a comprehensive guide for parliaments on how to use the indicators, which you'll find on the excellent website, parliamentaryindicators.org. And I'd like to give NDI another shout out because they did a fantastic job working with IPU in pulling together really an excellent website. And you'll find this very good guide to how to do parliamentary assessment of indicators on that website. So we hope that you'll find the assessment process interesting and useful. And also I want to emphasize that we welcome any and all feedback as we seek to continually refine and to improve these indicators and the assessment process. Thanks very much, and back to you, Irena.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we are now moving to a second section about drafting of indicators. It was the most interesting stage of indicator development, and a team of people was involved. However, our main drafters, Tamar Tugushvili, former Deputy Speaker in the Parliament of Georgia, and David Elder, former Secretary General of the Parliament of Australia, had a key role. I would ask them to share their impressions and experiences of their drafting tasks. Tamar, can you go first, please?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So first of all, I will join everyone else saying that it was absolute honor and privilege to work on this project. It indeed has been sometimes quite challenging, but as you said, Irena, interesting at all times indeed. So I will try to very quickly go through a very comprehensive process that this indicators, development of these indicators took. As you know, there are 111 dimensions and about 500 criteria, assessment criteria in these indicators. And the main challenge when drafting them was to make them universally relevant so that every parliament in every constitutional system in every continent would be able to use it equally well and apply this assessment tool in a way that the result would be equally useful for everyone. But beyond that, also the challenge was to develop this assessment criteria in a way that they help parliaments to assess not only their formal powers, but practice too, and how parliaments perform in practice. And the third thing that also had to be assessed is how well is the administrative support provided to the parliament when doing their job. And these assessments are encouraged to be done in a way that it's not only an assessment done by someone based on their very subjective understanding of a thing, but providing evidences, as many as possible, to help parliaments to also look around and see how others see the work of the parliament and incorporate this in the assessment of performance of parliament in every area of their work. The drafting process was starting with a very comprehensive research. So we've been looking into a huge amount of materials available, not only already existing practice tools, but also academic materials. The database that was developed by IPU in this process involves and includes already over 100 different sources, and all of them have been drafting these indicators and dimensions. After developing the first draft, we've been going through a very comprehensive process of review. First stage was review among the drafters, and we would exchange our drafts. We would provide comments to this draft and incorporate the feedback from colleagues into the documents. The second layer was review from the project team members, whose feedback was always tremendously useful, and all this feedback was incorporated in the renew and updated drafts. And this third level, the third layer of the review process was the feedback provided by the parliament where we had it and where there was a need. We've been again incorporating the feedback from the parliament in this draft dimensions and indicators. So this very, very complex and time-consuming but very interesting process was, I should say, a result of a great teamwork, and it was fantastically managed by Irena and Andy, and I want to use this opportunity to thank them, and also to thank all the drafters, especially David Elder, who is, as far as I know, is not in this meeting, but I had the pleasure of working with him very closely during this process. And I hope that parliaments will really see how beneficial this product can be for improving, excelling in their work, because this is truly a very useful, very practical tool, which can be used by every parliament in the world to really not only assess, but really see how to improve their work and how to become much better legislators. And I think that this is this was definitely worth the effort and time that was invested in this project. And I will stop here. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Yes, David is not live with us here. He was not able to join, but we have his pre-recorded message, which we'll watch now.
Be involved in this launch of the Indicators for Democratic Parliaments project. As a former Secretary General of the Australian House of Representatives, it was a privilege for me to be involved in the work of drafting the indicators. It was both an interesting and a challenging task. I believe that the indicators, a comprehensive and universally applicable framework for assessing the performance of parliaments, will provide an invaluable tool into the future for parliamentarians, parliamentary staff, evaluators and researchers as they go about their work. As a tool for parliaments themselves, it will enable them to benchmark their own capacity and develop approaches to improve their performance and effectiveness. It will also enable evaluators to assess the effectiveness of parliamentary support projects, many of which are supported by the IPU and UNDP, and will also provide researchers with a comprehensive description of expectations that would be required of democratic parliaments. In this time of challenge to our democratic systems around the world, I believe the project and the indicators will be a vital tool to respond to the challenges we face to our democratic system. I commend all those who've been involved in the work of the project, from my fellow drafters, the project team, the partners, and so on. I particularly congratulate the IPU for initiating this very important project, which I think will be of assistance to parliaments for many years into the future. I commend the launch to everyone who's involved.
In addition to an extensive review of indicators, as Tamar said, they have been pilot tested by around 20 parliaments in different stages of drafting the indicators. And we have received very useful feedback from many parliaments, and we are glad to have here staff members from 3 parliaments involved in pilot testing, from German Parliament, Parliament of Uganda, and Hellenic Parliament, to talk about the experiences in testing exercise. Before that, I would just like to notice that we are well entered into the space which is reserved for public for the discussion and for views from the parliament. So I would really ask our next speakers to stick to the time that was planned for the interventions. And sorry for this as well. Maybe the most comprehensive feedback came from Bundestag and Jochen Gukes, Parliamentary Support Program Coordinator. And Jochen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello from Berlin. Thank you for inviting the Bundestag, and it's a great pleasure to participate today. I'm very glad to hear that the testing we did was helpful, and it's good to finally see the results. We at the Bundestag really did have a valuable testing experience. It was an excellent cooperation between participating MPs and us here in the staff. It was helpful to think about our own way of doing things and to reflect about different parliamentary systems and the core of parliamentary duties valid for every parliament. It's become obvious how different parliaments are, those in a Westminster tradition, in a presidential system, or in the continental model like here in the German Bundestag. We have seen the importance of informal rules and traditions in our parliament, but we've also seen the benefit of written regulations. We talked about earlier when it came to evidence, so sometimes it's a little bit hard to put down informal evidence, but still it's playing an important role. So we've also seen the difference between formalities and functions. And in the end, we do think that it's about how well a parliament fulfills those core functions. Finally, it was a good starting point to think about where improvement of our own practices might make sense, where things are missing in our model, where it might make sense to introduce elements from other parliamentary systems. So to look ahead, the indicators will be a valuable tool. Thank you also for the excellent website. A valuable tool for different parliaments worldwide at different stages of their development. From the Bundestag's perspective, we will use it again internally for thinking about the potential for precisely the kind of innovations I've been talking about. And we will be able to use it in our parliamentary support activities as a sort of benchmark, especially for the preparation of incoming groups, but then also for workshops abroad as a starting point for comparison of practices. So thank you again for establishing these indicators and for the event today. We wish the indicators wide distribution and fruitful use.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Josephine Botera, Head Monitoring and Evaluation Division in the Parliament of Uganda. And I would ask her to share her views about the indicators.
Thank you very much, all members, and IPU kudos for this. This is a great opportunity to bring my views on board as it pertains to these indicators. I was privileged to be part of the peer review team that is comprised of members and staff of Parliament from the East and Southern Africa. And I will say that the role of parliaments in institutionalizing monitoring and evaluation systems is growing day by day. There have been concerns that parliaments are weak institutions when we're supposed to be strong. And so this call for SDG 16 is timely, and this mandate that has been given to IPU to deliver this is really commendable. And as institutions of parliament, we see that parliaments operate in a highly political environment that at times influences how monitoring and evaluation systems should be designed. And so these indicators are an opportunity for us to have a universal perspective and view and scope upon which all parliaments can work upon. And we see this as a way of motivating and instituting values of evaluation culture beyond parliament to other institutions, especially influencing the executive and other bodies that work with parliament. I congratulate IPU on this and invite all members and other institutions that have not yet tested to try and test this out, because we have benefited as people who had participated in the first process of domesticating the IPU toolkit. This is also another great tool that all of us should embrace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine, and I hope we'll talk soon about possible testing in your parliament. Vasilios Volopoulos and Nektarios Kyriakou are coming from the Parliament of Greece, from its European Product Innovation Unit, from which we have also received a valuable feedback in the previous testing process. You are both involved in testing, so what could be possible benefits of indicators assessment in your work?
Okay. Thank you, Irena. Thank you for letting us being part of this process. We're very pleased for two reasons. One is that as we are currently involved in various partnerships with other parliaments, supported by the Inter-Parliamentary, as Murphy said, the European Union, etc., we're very glad to have in our hands such a useful tool, a well-tested framework for working together with our partners in various parts of the world with parliaments. The other reason is, very quickly, we're very pleased to contribute in development and testing of the indicators, as we were forced to take a good deep look in our own procedures. More than 10 experts worked from a twinning project together with MPs and other staff. And I think Nektarios Kyriakou was a key element involved in the organization and the development. So Nektarios, please.
Thank you, Vasilis. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Our participation as a pilot in IPU's initiative for the creation of indicators for democratic parliaments gave us the opportunity to communicate and collaborate with IPU experts and executives with vast experience in the scientific study of parameters of the institutional functions. The study of the institutional functions, just let's say a few decades ago, was really far away from any logic of evidence-based analysis. This collaboration has made us better, enabling us to expand our horizons from this perspective even further, and helping us understand and measure our capacities and performance. Democracy is a living organism, and this projection in parliament's functions must be continuously studied, so it stays continuously improving. The use of scientific and technical tools is one-way road to the future where, let's say, silos and the resistance to change are obstacles of the past that can be well overcome by scientific results. The completion of this process will give the IPU an important live view of the global progress through methodological data collection and research. As a member of this first group, I would like to restate that participation in the completion of the indicators is in itself a very productive activity for parliaments, long before studying the aggregated results. And taking everything into account, my experience indicates that participation in this great project is a beautiful, beautiful journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasilios and Nektarios, and I would like to thank all speakers in this section of the launch meeting. It's time to wrap up, and I will not spend your time anymore. I need to say that I hope that views and thoughts and the experiences that have been shared here were really inspiring and useful to the audience. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Irena, and also to everyone else who's just shared their views. And I think this underlines just to what extent this has been a collective effort, bringing together parliaments and a number of organizations working with parliaments to put together their experience and their knowledge. And we genuinely thank everyone who has been part of the process so far, and extend a warm invitation to continue to remain part of this process. So we're going to move to the final segment of this online meeting. Our own internal timings are running a little off, but we want to allow for a little time for exchange and comments. And so we will have the possibility to extend for another 20 to 30 minutes from this point onwards. We'd be very keen to hear from any of the other participants that want to make a comment or ask a question based on what they've heard so far. To do so, please just use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and we'll recognize you. But before doing that, I'd like to invite Ms. Lana Acker of UN Women, also a member of the project team that has developed this preliminary version of the indicators. And if Lana would like to share her perspective on this piece of work, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And first of all, on behalf of UN Women, and I work for Women's Political Participation Team at headquarters in New York, we would like to congratulate IPU and other organizations who have been involved in developing this tool. And as always, we have been pleased to be partnering with IPU on initiatives that would eventually advance women's participation around the world. And we do hope that this tool will be used in one of those. And in the light of an underrepresentation of youth, persons with disabilities, and women, obviously, I would like to perhaps emphasize something that we haven't heard so far in the meeting. And we consider it's very important that this tool actually incorporates gender and diversity aspects by mainstreaming them in under some of the very important issues such as electoral integrity or composition of legislators and parliamentary bodies, under issue of parliamentary ethics, which I believe, as we're looking at the rising trends of violence against women in politics, it's becoming more and more important element as something to discuss when we are talking about how to address violence against women in politics, specifically in parliaments. Obviously, inclusive legislation oversight come to our mind, and the need to actually ensure that legislation, whatever is adopted, does reflect on needs and views of women and men in the country, and inclusive and institutional practices within the parliament. We are aware, hopefully everybody on this call is, of amazing tools that IPU has developed before, how to ensure the parliaments are gender sensitive. And we're really hoping that this tool will be used as a complementary to everything already that it's available, and that by doing this assessment, parliaments will be actually able to identify what are the key issues that they would like to address from the perspective of diversity and representation, and find and identify appropriate measures, actually how to do this and how to move the needle ahead. So once again, thank you very much for having us, and we look forward to working with you on promoting this tool further and seeing it finalized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lana, and for UN Women's contribution throughout the project and going forward. So, as an entry point into this final segment of today's meeting, I would like to put another polling question to you. I'm going to share my screen briefly here. 1 second while I organize myself. Okay, so guess I'm losing, not so used to Zoom anymore. So we've posted a link in the chat, and the question is, in which 3 areas does your Parliament perform best? So if you'd like to click on the link, you'll see the question. You'll see the 7 areas which correspond to the 7 targets listed in the SDGs, which corresponds to the 7 areas in which there are indicators for democratic parliaments. And hopefully as you vote, we will be able to see the results going up live. So we'll just keep this up for 30 seconds while you cast your votes. Which 3 areas does your Parliament perform best in? Okay, you got 5 seconds if you want to cast a vote. This is your last opportunity. Mentimeter is very pretty. Okay, so, oh, Emily, could you keep the results up just for a sec? Thanks, sir. Of course, this isn't exactly a scientific poll, but it's a little bit interesting to see that most people have responded, or the most responses are for the section on representative parliaments. And I wonder, I put that out as a question to you, if that's because it's a concept that is perhaps familiar, perhaps people have a mental model of what it means to be a representative parliament in terms of all sectors of society being represented, men and women being represented in parliaments, maybe different age ranges. And so this is something which we can say, okay, we're doing well or not well on representation. Whereas for some of the other areas, what does it mean to be effective? What does it mean for a parliament to be accountable? And if you've said, well, we think our parliament is transparent, then, well, how sure? What are you basing that assessment on? And we think that this is where the indicators can provide an entry point for asking and for you to begin to answer these questions by, as we've tried to break down, what are the different components of effectiveness, accountability, transparency, etc. Okay, thank you. If you could take the Mentimeter down. At this stage, I'd like to, oops, almost logged out of my own meeting. If anyone would like to take the floor, please do raise your Zoom hand. We have a little bit of time and space. Indeed, we'd like to hear from you. And just while we're waiting to see if there are requests for the floor, I have a question. Now, it's maybe it's a naive or a devil's advocate question, and it's addressed to everyone who is here on the call. We've said during this meeting and consistently throughout the process that the approach is based on self-assessment. Now, if the indicators are to measure parliamentary performance and capacity, then why allow for parliaments to assess themselves? What are the positive reasons, but also what are the risks? And how can those risks be managed? It's a bit of an open question. If you'd like to respond, then please do put up your hand. And maybe I'd like to ask Anthony Smith of the Westminster Foundation of Democracy, if you're here with us, if you would like to have a first go at responding. Why self-assessment?
Thank you, Andy. And it's a really important question because it goes to the heart of one of the objectives of this exercise, which you mentioned in your intervention earlier, which was about learning and development. So I think the main positive reason for self-assessment is that certainly in the project team, but that's based on the experience that those of us have through our work in different ways inside or working with Parliament, that the only way that an institution like a Parliament, or for that matter, many other institutions, is really going to benefit from an assessment exercise is if it feels real ownership of the process. So the assessment is being done because the Parliament feels that it is worth assessing their performance, and they are therefore going to take the results very seriously and try and implement them. The risk, of course, is that you get a process which leads to answers which might be the ones that you want to see rather than the ones that are really there. And that's something which every Parliament has to take responsibility for, to establish the assessment for the right reasons and with the right tools. And of course, in many cases, a self-assessment is also done with the help of outsiders, so it doesn't have to be done completely on your own. So I think self-assessment is mainly important because it stands the best chance of the results being implemented by the institution, in my view. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Anthony. I see Miguel Alvarez has also posted a response to this question, and he's posted it in Spanish. Maybe Miguel Alvarez, would you like to take the floor to develop your thought? And then we have a colleague from Ukraine, Stanislav Ivasik, who will follow. So let's go to the colleague from Ukraine first.
Buenos días.
Oh, we have Miguel.
¿Me escuchan?
Miguel, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Sí, para mí lo importante es que en estas autoevaluaciones se cuente con un método establecido dentro del mismo Parlamento para poder hacerlo de forma objetiva. Si se hace a criterio personal, pues me imagino que cada quien pensará que lo que se hace está bien hecho. También consideramos importante siempre hacer análisis de medios y de las diferentes ONGs que trabajan en el país para conocer sus opiniones y la forma en que ellos ven el trabajo parlamentario. Les hablo desde Guatemala.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate that that intervention from a colleague in Guatemala. Mr. Stanislav from Ukraine, and followed by Maria Baron.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Stanislav Ivasik. I am the legal advisor at the USAID RADA Next Generation program. It's an international technical assistance program helping Ukrainian parliament in the parliamentary reform. I will briefly answer your question and then ask mine, if I may. So answering your question, I believe that the self-assessment is crucial for any parliament because parliamentarians have to show leadership in their work. And I believe it's one of the recommendations of IPU's ethical conduct of the MPs, that the MPs have to show leadership, and only true leaders assess their conduct and their activities. And the challenge is, as already mentioned, that you always lean to the subjective side and you want to show maybe a little bit biased towards yourself. My question is the following. First of all, thank you very much for this, for working on the indicators. Just a brief presentation shows that the titanic work was done, and it's very comprehensive research I wonder, as you know, Ukraine is in difficult period now, connected with Russian aggression. Thus, martial law was in place, and some democratic procedures in the governments went through their necessary limitations. And I wonder if the indicators take into account or maybe assess the work of the parliament in the martial law or crisis, state of emergency, or any other types of crises. So can we assess the parliament in this difficult period following the indicators? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and of course we wish all the best to you and your work supporting the Ukrainian Parliament, and first and foremost to the Parliament and people of Ukraine themselves. We will take up that question in a minute. Just before doing so, I have hands from Maria Baron and our colleague from the Hellenic Parliament, Fotis Fitsilis. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Just on the previous question, I just wanted to share our sort of internal debate within if it was necessary a self-assessment or an assessment from outside sources. We debated it extensively within ourselves. But like Anthony said, the idea is to spearhead it, or to have it spearheaded by the parliament, but including outside stakeholders, like Miguel was saying earlier, maybe the media, civil society organizations, maybe other government agencies, to have sort of like a more collaborative assessment or a co-created assessment, and that would be a lot more rich. The risks associated with that, and we as civil society see it very clearly, and we hope this doesn't happen as much. The first one, of course, is that the parliament, our parliament doesn't decide to do the assessment. And so what do we do in those cases if they are supposed to spearhead it? And as Miguel was saying earlier too, the other risk and the obvious one is that the assessment is not done in a participatory way, and the outcome is that everything is fine and okay. So so I think that would be, at least from civil society perspective, sort of a lot of where we would put a lot of energy and muscle in the next phase when the parliaments decide to undertake this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Maria. Fotis from the Hellenic Parliament, over to you.
Good afternoon, Andy. Thank you for this opportunity. Dear friends, dear colleagues, many greetings from Athens. Allow me to share only two observations from our daily struggle or maybe efforts in communicating and discussing with various parliaments in the world. First of all, I would like to thank the colleagues for the titanic job to put together these indicators. The second thing I would like to say is that the usefulness of such an effort is going to be judged only by its usefulness in the field and by its utilization in comparative analysis and scholarly work, or even practical work by practitioners within the parliamentary institutions. In this regard, I would like to share you, we have discussed within my research team, and we said we can only judge them if we use them. So we are ready to utilize them standalone in our research, or even in joint projects within colleagues around the globe, to eventually, within a reasonable amount of time, I would say within a couple of years, to come up with scholarly products, scientific products that will prove their usefulness, so that they can maybe maintained in their current form or even evolved into something else. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is a key point as well about the junction between the political world of parliaments and the scholarly world, and we've tried and will continue these efforts and welcome the academic rigor that comes from the scholarly world and its practical application in parliaments. A colleague from Ukraine raised a question, which in a way echoes what Fotis has just said, that the value of the product is judged by its utilization. I would like to invite to see if there are elements of response to the question from our colleague from Ukraine about how the indicators may serve in times of crisis. I suspect not only in Ukraine, but in a broader sense. And it's a little bit hard for me to see who's on the screen. I see Jonathan Murphy from Inter-Parliamentary is here, and I wonder if, Jonathan, you'd like to take up this question.
Thanks very much, Andy, and thanks very much, Stanislav. And just to repeat Andy's words, in terms of the solidarity that I'm sure all of us want to extend to your program, which I know very well, having worked in Ukraine for a number of years, and to the Ukrainian Parliament and to the people of Ukraine. I think you raise a very good and a very important question. And actually, I've had some dialogue with colleagues at the Ukrainian Parliament since the crisis, because obviously there are very, very special conditions that exist. For example, there's a debate about to what extent is it possible to have full debates with members of Parliament in person when there is a risk, a physical risk of attack on the institution. My sense is that that it's always useful to have the indicators at all times and to act as a reference. But my suspicion is, if I'm going to be completely honest, that on a day-to-day basis at the period of the crisis, I think that probably the time to really spend a lot of time at looking at how you can strengthen the institution will be once Ukraine has been hopefully victorious in this armed conflict, and you move forward towards building and rebuilding a strong democracy on the basis of a situation of peace. I think it would be difficult in the middle of a war, of an aggression against your country, for the Parliament to devote its resources to a comprehensive study of its strengths and weaknesses. But I do think it can be a useful reference tool as the Parliament faces particularly difficult questions about how to function in a time of war. That's my input.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Tamar Chikoshvili to add her perspective.
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. And before answering the question, I should say that I'm from Georgia, and the situation in Ukraine is very close to our hearts, and we are very much hoping that this will be resolved soon. As for the specifics of the indicators, the indicator includes the whole package includes indicator number 4.2, which is responding to emergency policy issues and emergency. And this is the indicator which has several dimensions. And these dimensions, one of them is very much concentrated on parliamentary response to emergency. So this was, back then when we've been writing this, we had in our minds more COVID crisis and pandemics, but I think that it is written in a way that it can be very relevant in context of marital law as well. There is another dimension which is under the same indicator, which is communication about the emergency and the role of the legislatures and parliaments to communicate with the public with this kind of challenging times. And another dimension is numbered as 1.3.3, and it is procedures in time of crisis. And this is again specifically related to the how law is regulated and how procedures are in place when a specific country is going through a certain time of crisis. So as I said, this we've been keeping in our mind the pandemics, but it is not written only for the pandemic. It is written for emergencies and crises. And I think that these indicators and dimensions can be useful in Ukraine's context at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. And I think these are significant points that we all know that since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the notion of resilience in institutions has really come to the front. And many of you have been involved in finding ways to help build resilience in your parliament to continue to be able to function in different circumstances, whether it be all sorts of different crises which can come up, and generally I think parliaments are better prepared today and more resilient than before the crisis, and we at the IPU are trying to help parliaments share and learn the lessons in business continuity planning to be able to continue to function under whatever circumstances. As Tamara says, there are indicators around this notion of building resilience, and this is part of the IPU's current strategy for the next 5 years, supporting parliaments in this path. And then there is also the situation that our colleague from Ukraine is describing, and unfortunately, here at the IPU, we're in a position where we observe the situation of parliaments around the world, and there are a number of countries where the parliamentary institution is either unable to function or has been dissolved following a coup d'etat or different political circumstances. Afghanistan, Myanmar, current examples, Sudan, Mali in recent times, and there's always a period where the institution of parliament is rebuilt following an interruption, following a crisis. And I do believe that the indicators can support this, or can be useful in this period of rebuilding, reimagining how a country would like to set up its parliament. The indicators do provide aspirational targets, and do provide a framework for a dialogue between the different stakeholders and political forces in the country around what parliament they would like to see, how they would like to put in place their new institutions as they emerge from the crisis, whatever it may be. So as a framework for dialogue, the indicators have a role in that set of circumstances as well. I think at this point, I would like to draw this meeting to a close. I'd like to thank everyone, the participants, those who have taken the floor to share their views, to ask their questions. I'd like to say that from my personal perspective, the publication of this preliminary version of the indicators for democratic parliaments is a great achievement. It's taken a lot of work from a lot of people, bringing together their collective experience. I'd like to thank everyone for that effort. I would also say it's only a first step. This is formally a preliminary version, because we do have the ambition that the indicators are universal in scope, covering the whole range of parliamentary activities, covering the whole range of parliaments in their diversity. We believe that we can continue to improve this product through testing and feedback. And so with this event today, we are opening a period of consultation that will run throughout 2022. As you heard from the President of the Association of Secretaries General in Parliament, we will have a moment to exchange with the SGP in October, but we're also hoping to exchange with parliaments and all stakeholders that have an interest in the effective functioning of parliaments in the course of this year. So for the IPU, we have two priorities for 2022. The first is to finalize the indicators based on your feedback. And the second is to build a governance mechanism for the shared ownership of the indicators by the whole parliamentary community going forward, so that this set of indicators can be genuinely a common reference point, understood, owned, and used by the parliamentary community in its totality and its diversity. So with the perspectives of different parliaments and different partners coming together around a common goal of trying to support parliamentary development and strong democratic parliaments. So with that, with those words, I close today's meeting. We will run the same session tomorrow with English, French, and Spanish interpretation at 10 o'clock Central European time, Geneva time, and hopefully a new set of participants. Of course, you're very welcome. I'd like to thank the interpreters again for making this exchange possible. And I'd like to say, as a closing word, the document can look large. There are a lot of subjects covered. Don't be afraid. Pick one indicator, dive on in, take a look, see how it looks, feels, and if it makes sense to you in your context, and let us know what you think. We welcome all your feedback at standards@ipu.org by email and any other method. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure to share this moment with you, and wish you a very good rest of the day. Goodbye.